Welcome to the Fully Mindful podcast. I'm your host, Melissa. I designed this podcast for you. I'm so happy you're here. We are talking about what it means to live with more intention, creativity, and authenticity so we can make aligned connections. I'm a neurodivergent lawyer turned coach who found the healing power of breathwork and the powerful impact of mindfulness as we navigate this wild and beautiful ride of life. Here at The Fully Mindful, we dive deep with inspiring guests, share solo mini-sodes that are packed with tools you can apply immediately, and I mix it up a bit with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and host of the New World Normal podcast, Debbie Harrell, joins us for some down-to-earth, sometimes random, but always meaningful conversations. If you're ready to breathe, reflect, and grow, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful. Well, hello, everybody. This is Melissa with The Fully Mindful. I'm excited to have today's guest, Todd Smith. He is founder of True Inner Freedom, a longtime practitioner and facilitator of the work of Byron, which we're definitely going to get into, and a lifelong explorer of what it means to live with an open heart, even when life gets messy, because we all know it gets very messy. A highly sensitive person himself, Todd has dedicated his life to helping others move beyond fear, people-pleasing, and overthinking to find clarity, courage, and connection in their relationships and within themselves. With many, many decades of daily meditation practice and decades of deep facilitation experience, he's also become a sort of gentle guide for those who want to stop living from their conditioning and really start living from love. We're going to get into Todd's 3-step framework for helping highly sensitive people become more confident and connected. And undoubtedly, we're going to uncover a lot more. So really looking forward to this conversation. I know we're going to get a lot out of it. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Melissa. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I always love to start with a little bit of an origin story. You've described your life's work as helping people live with an open heart, even when this feels difficult or even impossible. Was there a moment or season perhaps in your life when your own heart felt most closed, or what helped you find your way back into this work?
It's a great question. I think hearts open and close all the time, and sometimes they're big openings and big closings, and it's a cycle. If I look at my life, my heart was pretty open, and when I was very young, I had a pretty happy childhood. I learned meditation when I was young. I think that helped just keep the heart open in a lot of ways. I didn't go through a lot of trauma when I was a kid. It became more challenging when I got out of school. I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I ended up living in an ashram for 10 years, which was a very cool experience. But there were some stresses also about like self-judgments. Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or I'm just putting things off, or I need to get enlightened, and like
quickly.
And, so then I can get out and spend the rest of my life sharing that,
Right.
So those kinds of pressures. And I think it first happened when I had a relationship. This was actually kind of crashed the car, I would say, for me. I was in a single men's program in this ashram, and I ended up getting a girlfriend, and I didn't quit the single men's program for a while. And so I was in this limbo land where I was kind of being secretive, and my heart was open in both directions, but I couldn't make the two work together. And so that really did shut down my heart a lot. And then, I've had other different experiences. Relationships have been a challenge for me, I'd say. My current partner, who I've been with for 25 years, it was challenging in the beginning, and I used to get really frustrated and angry and feeling stuck and powerless. So I've had some dark days, and I've also had some really nice experiences. And I think what's more important for me is how over time I've learned how to transform the dark experiences into more of a light experience. And that's exciting because there's a little bit of ability. Sometimes we just have to take it, and that's part of life too. But it's nice when there's a little bit of leverage that you can begin maybe shifting the direction.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that must have been very difficult just going back to the ashram and having that being part of that single men's group and then finding somebody who you wanted to spend some time with in a more romantic, intimate way and not finding a way to be able to do both, right? They were somehow inconsistent with one another. So, how were you able to, or what did you learn maybe in retrospect from that experience about how to be with those kinds of difficulties and make choices nonetheless that hopefully are aligned with your heart?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of learning in retrospect. At the time, I just crashed and burned and really kind of went through depression for a while and couldn't really, like became harder to sit in meditation. After it all kind of fell apart, I was sort of left with nothing in a way. And it just felt like I'd neither had the spiritual world nor the like material world at the same time. But in retrospect, as first of all, time does heal quite a bit, but not completely. There's still elements of trauma in there, in that. And as I've grown and as I've just developed as a person and found new tools, at that time I didn't know the work of Byron Katie. And once I discovered that little tool, I realized I can go back to those old situations that got me and work through them and look at all the different angles and find my innocence again
Mhm.
and find that I was doing the best I could. And there was some serious like what would you say? Like, I missed some serious things here. Like you can't do two opposite things at the same time, which my idealistic mind says, of course you can.
Why not?
Why not? Right. So yeah, it's if there's been a theme in the time since I left the ashram, it's been a process of integration and becoming more real, like getting into the real world for me.
Mhm.
That has, yeah, it's ended up making me more grounded and allowing me to play with everybody else in the real world and in the limitations of the real world. I
Yeah.
I still love being like all possibilities are there, and I think that's true on the inside, but we have to step into the game at some point, and that requires some learning and some falling down, banging our knees a little bit, and so I'm more and more open to that. I think that's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, I think Jack Kornfield summed it up nicely in the title of one of his books, which is After the Ecstasy, the Laundry.
Exactly that.
Right. And
Yes.
that's that reintegration, or how do we do this? We can't all have the luxury, I see it as a luxury, of and work of sitting all the time or being on top of a mountaintop or being a monk. I mean, that's fantastic. But how do we do this, like you said, this real life? How do we come back to that? How do we heal past wounds? And those are real skills that you need in your everyday life that, yes, meditation is helpful for, undoubtedly, but it's not the only work that we can rely on to move through that. And to that end, you mentioned the work of Byron Katie. And so if you could maybe tell the listeners a little bit about Byron Katie and the work of Byron Katie.
Yeah, the work of Byron Katie is an amazing little tool. It's so simple, it's free, anyone can play with it on your own. And it's just four questions that you ask yourself. And then I guess we could back up. You start by identifying a stressful moment and a stressful situation. The more specific, the better. And then what were you actually thinking in that moment? And
Mm,
so you have to look and sit, and it's a little bit of a meditation. Okay, yeah, somebody said this to me. What was I actually thinking about them? Or what was I believing about them? Or what was I wanting or needing in that moment? And when you identify that, you write it down. And then you go through these four questions, just asking, like kind of challenging yourself on a gentle level of, is that really true? I tell my clients, I don't care about objectively, whether it's true or not. I want to know what your experience is. What do you feel? Because there's a kind of a stuck part of us that is crying and triggered and hurt in a situation. But there's also this kind of wise part of us that sees the big perspective, read all the books, knows all the little quotes, and can kind of coach us and all that. But when we're doing this work, we have to stay connected to the stuck part. That's like the slowest part of us. We can only walk as fast as that slowest part of ourselves. And so I want to give space for that and say, like, is that really true? Like, I want to hear your experience. And if it's a yes, yes, it's really true. I honor that. But if it's a no, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if it's a yes, then the second question is, can you absolutely know that that's true? It's just another way of coming back and just being, are you sure? But again, honoring the emotion that is coming to you with this crying or hurt or angry experience. So throughout this whole process, staying connected with that is what makes it work. Otherwise, it just becomes some intellectual process. You can just do Sudoku or something like that.
Right.
Then there's further questions. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought, which opens up your mind to the effect of believing that thought, whether it's true or not. What happens when I believe that? I go into a rage, or I retreat, or I binge, or whatever. There's so many reactions that can happen. And then who would I be without the thought in the same situation, without anything changing? Same person said the same thing, but if I didn't believe this in whatever my emotional interpretation was, it suddenly often gives a lot of space and possibility that is like can kind of blow your mind when you first step into it. And then the last part of this process is to take the original thought and find opposites. So whatever you were believing, like he doesn't like me, or he was mean to me, or whatever, it's like find opposites. He wasn't mean to me, or I was mean to myself, or I was mean to him. And you play with these to see if there's any truth in them. They're like new hypotheses,
Mm-hmm.
exact opposite of what we're believing. So it's not going to be like a no-brainer. We're not going to be like, oh yeah, oh for sure, that's true. Occasionally that happens, but a lot of times it is, whoa, okay, that's a radical idea. Could it be true? And then you have to look and again keep asking this little stuck part inside of you, okay, do you see any other evidence, or is there anything else that makes sense around this opposite of what you were believing? And often you do find really amazing gems sitting there that shift the way you experience the same situation, the same relationship, all of that. It's amazing. It's very simple. Byron Katie's been teaching it for many years, and she's had her own path of just kind of falling into a awakening, if you will, and kind of sort of discovering this question. She says they found her. However it happened, it's a miracle. It's like these little questions that, if held right and done with a gentle, open mind, can really transform. So that's what the work of Byron Katie is all about.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wondered, asking for a friend. No, if you have someone who, and I know you said you can do this on your own, but it seems to me it's probably very helpful to have a skilled facilitator like yourself or somebody else who can gently guide you through this. But if you have someone that you're working with who's particularly obstinate or really stuck, I mean, just really stuck, that they're unable to see the opposite or unable to see if it's really, really true, what do you do then as a facilitator?
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, everybody, this is Melissa with The Fully Mindful. Have you been curious about the power of the breath? Join me for in-person or online breathwork sessions in the new year. We have themes such as awaken, reset and manifest, love and kindness, empower and energize, and more. We'll use conscious connected breathwork for truly transformational sessions with curated music and somatic coaching. Visit the website at thefullymindful.com for detailed information on upcoming sessions. Fulfill your need for personal development and breathe into the new year with purpose and intention. See you there.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, part of the training I went through to become a facilitator was to question my thoughts about my clients, which
Mhm.
amazing process to go through. And a lot of things that I thought I needed or wanted for my clients, good things, became attachments and I didn't realize that. And when you question them, you start to find, oh, okay, they will get what they get and we'll see, right? They may have an amazing experience. They may walk away going, this is nuts and never come towards it again. And sort of it's kind of like that's their business. And my business is to hold the space, to invite, and to just uh, be there for them. That said, to get a little closer to your question, the work does require a certain amount of openness. Like if I'm just like, no way, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to examine any, find my part in any way, for God's sake, no. Then there are times when the mind is super closed and you really can't do the work. Even someone who's been doing the work for a long time, you may be closed on certain issues. You may just be like, I can't go there. Like, I'm just not willing to ask these questions because they're very, they're strong questions. And there are different clients that also may just not be willing or just not open, and that's okay.
Right.
However, one last thing to add to that is that when it's shown to a client, when I'm working with a new client and I'm showing them what we're really doing here and how respectful it is of the part of me that's hurt, there's a lot of trust that naturally starts to follow there. There's a certain willingness to explore. If this stuck part of me thinks that I'm going to attack it with a barrage of questions to get it to change its mind, it's going to go into defense mode. It's going to shut down. And it's going to say, please, speak to the hand. I have no interest in your little self-inquiry. Leave me alone, right? It'll get very stubborn. And so safety is the most important thing. And so I'd rather just, um, I don't care what the outcome is. I
Mhm.
want to meet that crying part and just hold it. And if that's as far as it goes, that's fine. But what I find is when it's really clear that part is in the driver's seat and that it gets to answer the questions and it can say no, like this is, or it can say whatever, like it's free and that there's no agenda being pushed on it, then it starts to explore, just like a little kid does. When you give it space and it starts to look and starts put one and two together and it starts getting excited, things shift in there that would be surprising. And it can't happen if you're trying to impose order on your system. It has to come from inside. So that's the key essence of the work. With so many people, that resonates and feels safe. And even though it is a little scary and takes courage and is challenging, there's enough feeling of safety there that it balances it out. But that said, there are a few people that just are like, yeah, no, not for me. That's fine.
Not right now. Yeah, it
Yeah.
reminds me of internal family systems work in a way, right? So the part that is maybe exiled or protector coming forward and the exile saying like no, or the protector, no, here's the hand. We're not ready. But the key there, like you said, was creating safety for that part to be there and to experience what it is and to acknowledge it. So it's not trying to push it away, which I think, unfortunately, many tools that we've learned throughout our lives would have us push things away rather than allowing it to have space. We're afraid of it, right? Parts of ourselves are afraid to allow the space to feel. But what we learn is when there is that safety created by another, facilitator, a counselor, or a friend, even, that part can actually express itself, maybe for the first time, and really be heard. And that's so empowering. That in and of itself, not to mention all the questions and the insight that you might get from asking the questions, right?
Yeah,
Just allowing that part some space is really powerful work.
it really is. When I was young, again, I said I had a happy childhood, but it was interesting. I think we were biased towards positivity a little bit, and I didn't
Mhm.
really get a lot of experience allowing the stuck parts of myself to be heard or to really cry or to really feel like I could be messy in a way. And so I think I had a bias against negativity, and I think a lot of us do, where it's going to be out of control. It's going to make things worse. And there's a fear that if I go into something, it's going to take over.
Right.
And what I find in this work, just as you described, is that providing a space for that and allowing that a forum to be heard and allowing a place where it can rant and rave, but it's not going to hurt anybody,
Hmm.
um, starts to give permission for this unseen, unheard part of ourselves to show up and to get what it needs, which is love and attention, just like every other part of ourselves. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, if you get it to challenge itself on and go even further, then even better. But just holding, just giving space is huge.
Yeah. Well, that and you do lots of other work and practices. I know we've talked before, and you've been practicing transcendental meditation for decades, I believe, right?
Since I was young, since I was 6, yes.
You were
I'm
6. That's
50,
so amazing.
55 now, so
Yeah, yeah. So that's amazing. And I don't know, there's a certain, I don't want to say magic around transcendental meditation because it's highly practical, but could you describe a little bit of how that has worked in your life from the age of 6 to 50 something?
yeah. Yeah, it's just this sweet little practice. Again, simple. It's a mantra-based meditation. You sit quietly with your eyes closed and just think this mantra in a particular way. And it is what I experience is, and they've done tons of research on it as well, is that you settle down, your mind starts to settle, and you start feeling quieter. And so breath rate settles, heart rate settles, all kinds of stress chemicals settle. They've done all that kind of research. But on an experiential level, it just feels like I get a reset twice a day. So in the morning, I start with the meditation, and then after work, I meditate before dinner. And a large part of the stress of the day just falls away. And there's energy that starts to come up inside. And I feel the emotion of happiness just coming up without any reason for it. Just like my body's feeling more relaxed, my mind's feeling more supple, and creativity comes out of that. So for me, this is, I say there's two engines on the train of my peace train, if you will. One is the work of Byron Katie, and the other is transcendental meditation. They're both valuable for different reasons, but they both do something similar, which is it feels like they bring light in where there was darkness. So when you meditate, something about the expansion that happens of the mind, and there's a lot of brain coherence that happens as well. It's like bringing light into the room. The whole room light just starts to increase on a dimmer switch. And this carries outside of meditation. The work of Byron Katie shines light on a particular area where there was a lot of shadow or a lot of confusion. And same thing, you start to see more light. With more light, there's less problems. So yes, it's been a part of my life. I meditated in high school and college, noise going around all around me, not a problem. It was just this quiet little thread connecting back to myself. And when I was in the ashram, it was also with transcendental meditation. I went deep with it, and you can go really deep with it. I just remember how expanded my heart felt and how wide awake my consciousness felt, and just it's like amazing. So it's a powerful tool that can be used.
And it sounds like both of those serve you very well in the work that you do with others, because if you have this mind and heart that are both open and receptive and spacious, like that gives you the spaciousness and the compassion to work with others who are maybe need some light, right? Yeah.
Yeah. People sometimes ask me, how can you work with stressed people all the time? Isn't that stressful? And I think it's a combination of those two things. One is the work that I've done and continue to do, just keeping that healthy separation between me and my clients. Like their business is their business, my business is mine. I'm there to hold the space, and I'm not there to fix their lives or they have to do that themselves. So that helps a lot. And then the second part is just that inner stability or inner awareness that grows through meditation is just there. And again, if I get overwhelmed, then there's the next meditation to reset and come back to myself.
Yeah. You work with stressed people. I know that I wanted to talk with you about working with highly sensitive people. And so let's dive into that a little bit. What is a highly sensitive person?
Yeah, this is such an interesting area. I only really discovered that I was a highly sensitive person a few years ago. A couple different people suggested, you might be a highly sensitive person, friends of mine. And I took the test, and sure enough, I definitely was. And it explained a lot of things because all my life I've been kind of a slow processor, but I'm not dumb. I just take longer to process things. I'm very aware of other people's emotions and what they're experiencing around me. And I always have been. And I'm sensitive to things like noise. Like I can't be around a television without fully focusing on the television. I can't just
Right.
have that going in the background. It doesn't work with me. So these are all traits of highly sensitive people, and we can go a little more deeply into that. The person who first did the research on this is Dr. Elaine Aron, and she started, I think, in the 90s, and the research is still going on with her and other researchers. And she's written a number of books if you want to look closely at it. But it is an amazing discovery because it helps to normalize what is actually normal for a number of us. About 15 to 20% of the world's population fits in this category of being highly sensitive. And what that means is that we, first of all, process things more deeply. And so one person takes in information, processes it, and then moves on. A highly sensitive person takes in the same information, maybe even takes in more of it because of the sensitivity, then processes it more deeply, building more connections between all the parts and what they already know and everything, and then often reaches overwhelm if they're not careful. So first characteristic is there's an acronym DOES, does for depth of processing, like overwhelm is the O, E is for emotion or empathy, and S is for sensitivity. So when a highly sensitive person is exposed to a situation, they will process things more deeply. They can be very analytic. They can be very deeply understanding of things. And
Mhm.
there's very great value in this. They take their time. They want to get to the bottom of it.
Mhm.
But if they don't balance themselves, they can reach overwhelm much quicker than other people. And so that is the caution for all of us as highly sensitive people, that we have to pace ourselves. We have to build in things like meditation or inner work or, like the work of Byron Katie or other things to and get enough sleep and take care of our meals. We can't fake it. We can't fudge it.
Right. And there's a lot of, I think, overlap with some other types of traits for other people. Like we've talked before offline about ADHD, right? And so some people who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which I do not like the name because don't think it's really I don't think it's accurate. But in any event, that many people with ADHD are highly sensitive persons, but not everybody. And there's a little bit of, if we had a Venn diagram, some overlap with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, right? Because some people who are highly sensitive are more prone to that, to rejection and feeling it really deeply because they are highly sensitive. So if they have both traits, they're going to feel that rejection very, very deeply. I find that fascinating, right? Like there's all this overlap between ADHD and HSP and rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but they are all very discrete traits or different types of people, right?
Yes. Like we're talking about neurodivergence, right? Where there are a lot of different things that are not the mainstream way people are built. And yet, when you understand these different ways of being, the different traits within us, then it can give a lot of understanding. And so, yes, there is a crossover. There's a lot of, if you put all the Venn diagrams together, you'd see the intersections of where HSP intersects with ADHD and all of the other different types of experiences like neurodivergent traits. What I love about all this research is that it helps us to accept ourselves more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the main purpose, maybe two purposes. It helps us to stay balanced so that we know we're too much is too much for us. But a lot of times, as highly sensitive people, or can be the same with other traits, we think there's something wrong with us. And because other people don't have this and we're in a minority. And so we tend to judge ourselves or just silently think there's like really something off or wrong. And when we learn about these, like this is normal for us, it can give a lot of relief. This is actually forms one of the pillars of stress management for highly sensitive people that I teach. That just to understand this trait, understand it deeply, look at it, your own experiences, reframe your experiences from your life in the light of this experience. Oh, that's because I'm HSP. Like, oh, I get it, and then a lot of ease can bring it, can come in. Stress is another layer on top of whatever our trait, whatever our base nature is. And that can be worked with. That's where we do need to do like the work of Byron Katie, or that's when we do need to do other kinds of maintenance and excavating of that stress so that we can become more and more normal for ourselves. But our normal is going to be different from other people's normal.
I think that's such an important point. And I know I'm a highly sensitive person, and I also happen to have ADHD, and I probably have some rejection sensitivity, dysphoria weaved in there as well. But that'll often be the issue, right? Is I'll compare myself to other people who are not HSP. And it's in the comparing mind, as they call it in Buddhism. That's where the big problem is, right? When I start comparing my insides to other people's outsides, as particularly people who are not HSP, right? That's where I get myself in trouble. So you're nodding for those who are just, Todd is nodding away. Yeah. So what do we do in that situation when we find ourselves comparing? If we can catch ourselves, we have that much awareness. Okay, I am comparing myself to, my neighbor who seems like the most quote unquote normal person out there and is clearly not HSP, but I feel like I'm supposed to be like my neighbor, but I'm not. And so there must be something wrong or bad with me.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you do, right?
Yeah.
So this is where I love the work of Byron Katie for this. This is just like such a perfect situation for using the work. And what I would do is like look at, like you just said, I'm supposed to be like this person. Like that's a thought. And so I can put that on paper and ask the part of me that is stuck going, oh, I should be like that person. And actually ask, like, is that really true? Are you sure? Can you absolutely know it's true? And then how do you react when you believe that thought? And who would you be without that thought? And just asking those questions, either yourself, I often do it in writing on my own, or with a friend, or with someone who's a facilitator or a therapist. And you start to find space, and then you find turnarounds. Like I'm not supposed to be like that other person. And then you find examples why you're not supposed to be like that person. And the finding of examples is super important, because it's just like another theory. If you just say, turn it around, like, oh yeah, like I'm not supposed to be like that person. Okay, yeah, that's good. Moving on. But nothing's really shifted on the inside. So you have to take time and make lists of examples of why it's why you're actually not supposed to be like them. And you should actually stop trying to be like that person, and why you're built for something different, and your specialty in this world is different than theirs. And you'll find examples as you look at a specific situation. So that's just a great way of unhooking from the kind of comparison trap that we can all get into so easily.
And there are really some gifts, and I think you've not said that outright. You've certainly hinted at the gifts of being somebody who's highly sensitive, right? That empathy trait is so strong in highly sensitive people in a way that might not be as strong. I mean, certainly other human beings have empathy, but maybe not as strongly. So with that, or some other traits that HSP persons have, I mean, what kinds of things can they do with those strengths, with that highly gifted amounts of empathy, for instance?
Yeah, this is our specialty. Like everyone has empathy, but we have it in spades. We have it like an overabundance of it. And it's not an overabundance, it's just in comparison to others, you would say
Right.
it's a lot. But this is a super thing to have because it allows us to really listen. Like if you want to be heard and really you need to be heard, or you're hurting, for example, someone who is a highly sensitive person is going to be an amazing person to meet you there. They're going to be able to hear what you're saying, understand, even intuit what's going on. And there's going to be a lot of compassion around that, not a lot of judgment, like we all have, there's a reason we keep our stresses hidden, because we fear judgment. But for example, as an HSP myself, when I meet with clients, they bring all kinds of situations and I feel compassion. I feel empathy. I see myself in them. I see us as human beings. These are HSP traits, and they can allow us to be holding a space really beautifully for another human being. So a lot of the caring professions the HSPs thrive there. Even in families, they are one that can hold together opposites and manage that in a really beautiful way. They love harmony and they promote harmony and they do a good job of doing that. They can see both sides. So this is a superpower. This is something that not everybody has, and it's a skill that can be so valuable, especially in a world today where everything's polarized and so much division. HSPs are capable of bringing opposites together. And so we need HSPs in this world. And when we own our superpower, and that's just one, then we can actually share that with others, act on that, and share the gift with everyone. There are so many different, you can call them superpowers for being an HSP, just evolutionarily. And they found that HSP trait shows up in over 100 species they looked at, that
Wow.
20% of every species. They looked at fish, they looked at, everything. Highly sensitive. And what they do is they notice more of the details. They will spend more time foraging than the others, and they actually end up finding things that the others didn't, or they perceive danger before it happens. So, same thing. HSPs can see where things are going a lot of times. And if they're in a position of being an advisor or something like that, then they're going to help to guide away from pitfalls that others may not see. Because the majority of people their trait is to rush in and with energy, like deal directly with something. Whereas the HSP way is to stop and think about it first, to pause and reflect before jumping in. And so we're very skilled at doing that and seeing what the landscape looks like before rushing in. Now, that may make us look like we're super slow, or it's not going to make us too great on the playing field sometimes, where you have to just constantly change and move in a new direction. But for the more strategic roles or the more caregiving roles or the more like that kind of approach, I think this is where HSPs really thrive.
Yeah, I could see that being a really great leadership quality, right? Being able to see many, many different sides, take a pause, find common ground, see how you can bring things together, what you need to avoid. Yeah, I could see that as a really big strength. I got my ADD went off for a tangent there, a little ride. We were talking about empathy this morning. I think it was this morning. I saw a reel where it was a cat, and the owner of the cat brought in a little kitten stray. And she had previously thought that her adult cat had zero empathy, and she was very worried about them being together. But she introduced them, and this poor little stray who had been on its own and had not had a good life thus far just sat in that cat's lap. And that cat, the adult cat, just took it right in and just started licking it and grooming it and hugging it and loving it. And that's what made me think of like, oh, that cat was probably highly sensitive. Knew exactly what this little kitty needed in that moment. And, no one knew that this cat had it in her, but she did.
And the cool thing about, like we tend to have that quality strongly in us as highly sensitive people. But if, like, when we exemplify that, it does tend to bring that out in others as well. So it is, leadership by example in a way as well.
Right. When you see somebody being empathetic, it triggers that empathy in you. Like, oh yeah, that's the right thing to do. And how do I do that? And it's such a lovely quality. Sort of I guess, I don't know if there's a downside, but sometimes highly sensitive people can be conflict avoidant, right? You mentioned something about seeking harmony. So that can be a challenge for some of us, right? When we don't
Yeah.
like conflict, we want to bring people together. This is really
Yep.
uncomfortable, right? I want to be the kitty that, the cat that brings in the kitty and gives it love. I don't want to deal with maybe another cat who's not happy about that. So how does somebody who's highly sensitive manage conflict?
Challenge, right? Highly sensitive people avoid conflict to a certain degree because experiences land much more strongly than us. We feel emotionally more than other people. So the same conflict tends to really bring something up or have a more impact on us. There's a part of us that just wants to avoid that. And that is probably a good thing in a way. But what can happen, which actually doesn't have to do with being an HSP, is that we can get attached to not having conflict. There's a difference between having a preference and even intelligently avoiding conflict for self-preservation and sanity of mind and all good reasons. But there's a difference between that and being attached to not wanting conflict. And so if you're attached, then you're like, or even if it's a push away, like I'm holding not to have that experience, then now I'm beginning to enter into the world of where I'm fighting with reality. Byron Katie talks about arguing with reality. This is a perfect example of where things should be different than they are. The people shouldn't fight. This person shouldn't be a bully. These things, while true on one level, are an absolute argument with the way things are. And what happens now is that I'm in conflict with conflict.
Right.
Now we've got a double conflict going on. We had the conflict of the people out here fighting, or maybe they're fighting with me, I don't know. And then we have the conflict in my mind of being in conflict with that conflict. This shouldn't be happening. And so that draws me in, locks me in to that conflict and makes me feel like a total victim. And it's a major stress. So this is where we branch away from the trait of HSP and we say, okay, this is a call for inner work. Now we go and look at, I need them to stop fighting. Is it true? And then we go into that work again. How do I react when I think I need them to stop fighting? I feel powerless. I feel angry. I feel anxious, all of that. Who would you be when they're fighting if you didn't have the thought that you need them to stop fighting? It's like suddenly there's just a little more space in the room inside. I'm like, oh, like they're fighting. I can't control it. I'm kind of aware of what's going on, but I'm not drawn into it. That makes a huge difference. I even can see without the thought that I have the option to leave that situation if I want to, just to protect myself. So all kinds of options open when you start to do your inner work on these types of conflict situations. So yeah, that's the short answer. Maybe it wasn't so short, but that's
Short and sweet.
Yes.
And so in that process, you're helping people who, whether they're highly sensitive persons or not, going from conflict avoidant to confident to connected to being at least at peace with the reality that there is conflict, right? That's happening before them. So they move from not just being troubled by the conflict that's they're witnessing or experiencing, but like you said, it's sort of that double-edged sword of like, oh, and now I'm in conflict with reality because I think this should be some other way. And so they move from that to feeling like having the space to see the conflict for what it actually is.
Yes.
and
And
being
what happens there is creativity starts to be available, like intelligence starts to be available. When I'm caught in a victim mode, then my higher brain function just kind of shuts down and I go into fight or flight or all those kind of reactions. And when I start finding space again and I'm not in conflict with the conflict itself, then I start to see options that I didn't see before. I can think of something to say that might actually diffuse the whole thing in a second. Or I find generosity where I could actually meet them halfway. Or I find understanding, like, oh, this is just a hardwired part of their personality that they can't change. And so it's like, I'm not afraid of it as much. I see a human being on the other side instead of, a monster
right, or some sort of threat. Yeah.
or threat, right? Because I'm bigger. Like always the problems disappear when awareness expands.
Mhm.
When I have a wide expanse of awareness, then the same problems are happening, but they're like in miniature, they're smaller, they're just not as overwhelming. When my consciousness is tight and small, my porthole is tiny, then one little thing can block it and completely block out all the light and frighten me and all of that. So this is about finding space in myself so that it is less overwhelming. Yeah.
It is such an apt description. I've certainly experienced that, and I'm sure many of the listeners have as well. When something happens and you either become afraid or anxious or something, it becomes, like you said, very tight, and the view becomes very narrow. And it's so much harder to see what's really happening. So if you can have something that widens that awareness and that scope, now you can see it for what it is and not be just zeroed in on the one thing that's really terrible and awful
Yeah.
and causing
Exactly.
fear, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of other words of saying that are attachment, right? Attachment is very small, and then looser hold is very wide. So there are many words like where you'll find this differential between small and expanded. And so anything that moves you towards more expansion and less attachment, that's going to move you towards more freedom and more possibilities and more solutions, ironically, even on the external level.
And where does people pleasing fit within all that? Because I know a lot of folks who would identify as highly sensitive because of their interest in harmony, because of their sometimes conflict avoidant personalities, right? I'm gonna be able to do the men's single men's ashram and have the girlfriend, right?
Right?
I'm going to
Exactly.
do it all. It's all good,
Yeah.
right? I'm just going to manage the situation. I might lose myself in the process, but I'm going to manage this just fine by pleasing everybody in this role.
Exactly. Yeah.
How does that fit in with this?
Yeah. So, we love harmony. That's so it can become, again, an attachment, almost an addiction, if you will, to go further with it. But if you want harmony, if you need harmony desperately to be okay, then there's a problem because you can't always have it. And so you end up sometimes people pleasing to try to maintain harmony. And what happens is you maintain it on the outside, right? You go the extra mile, you bend over backwards, you give more than you really were asked to, and you end up people love it. People love you. Like, oh, everything's great. But then you didn't get to show up to the party because when you're saying yes, yes, yes to everyone, and it's not 100% a yes to you, then you're breaking a kind of integrity with yourself. You're like actually saying no to yourself in a way, and you're excluding yourself. And if that happens too much, then you will start finding resentment builds and you can burn out. There's all kinds of things that can happen if, for example, if you can't say no, or you're just trying to please and give what other people want instead of looking at most relationships are a kind of give and take. There are two sides to a relationship, and that it has to work for me as well as working for you. And if I'm only focused on you, which tends to be an HSP trait, tends to be something when you're empathetic, you do focus on other people. When you're conflict averse, you do focus on other people. Like you can see why we fall into it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's still not, that's that's still imbalance. That's not a defining characteristic of being highly sensitive. It's something that we easily fall into.
Mhm.
And that in itself then becomes a call for inner work to see if I can find a way of being in a situation where I can be more okay with somebody not liking it because I'm bringing who I am into the situation. And this is the beginning of balancing. And it's a process, right? We have to start like we learn to walk, and it's very, we make a lot of falls and all that. But moving in that direction, you'll feel it. It feels like balance. It feels like it takes courage to do.
Mhm.
But if you begin moving in that direction, things start to open up because the world starts to see who you really are, not the facade that you were presenting, which was very kind and very nice, but not always authentic. And
Right.
so, yeah, that's really where this work leads to. It's the same process. Again, practically, how do you do that? Take situations where you weren't able to say no, take situations where you were super people pleasing, and look at what you were thinking and believing there, question those thoughts, and see if you can find opposites that start to balance. My turnarounds point me out into being, like selfish. And it sounds like this sounds really like almost blasphemous to my little internal religion that you should always be kind and always be thinking of others first. Yeah, that's true, but in balance. And so the funny thing about these dictums or religious ideas is that they're true, but always to balance something else. Like maybe if people are being too selfish, they need to hear a little bit about being selfless. But if I'm being too selfless, I need to be a little more selfish to balance that out. And somewhere in the middle is the truth. Again, the wider perspective. Like
Right.
truth is not just be selfless and it's not just be selfish. It's a balance of both of them at the same time. And that requires, standing back, a bigger awareness.
I wonder if you ever work with people, or what you would say for people who truly don't know who they are. Like I remember there was a time in my life where honestly, if you would have asked me what my favorite color was, I would have said, "What would you like it to be?" Right?
Same thing. For like
I have no
20
idea.
years. I finally just decided it's going to be red, but I had really, like, the first 20 years of my life, I did not know what my favorite color was, did not know what I was going to be when I grew up. I could not
Yeah.
answer those questions.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you approach it when somebody is really that far lost in maybe their people pleasing or their conflict avoidance? They really do want to get to the bottom of it, right? They really do want to be themselves authentically, but they have no idea who that person is.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, on the one hand, I can also, there's like a kind of first layer of work on this that, I need to find out who I am. Is it true, right?
Right.
Just to soften that. Like, okay, it's okay that I lived 20 some years without having a favorite color.
Sure.
It's okay that I'm still learning what is my favorite kinds of music. Like, it's still like I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. Like, it's okay to not have everything nailed down also.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there's the balance side, which is where you're asking is how could I get in touch with that more? And I think first thing that comes to mind, meditation is really good at getting me in touch with myself and hearing that. But on top of that, it's just exposure to, like, I guess, feeling safe enough to expose myself to different kinds of things and ask myself, what do I like? What do I appreciate? What interests me? And that's been an interesting process for me. I think it's still very active for me. I'm learning about myself. I remember I was thinking about what kind of hobby should I have? Not that I should have a hobby, but I remember thinking, like, what kind of hobby would I like? It probably is a good idea. And I sat and just kept asking. And that's what I suggest is ask an open-ended question to yourself. What is my favorite color? And really spend time with that. And it might take research, it might take years. It's an open-ended question. And But what often happens is something comes out from inside when you ask yourself. So I can't remember what example I was using, but
Oh, you were talking about what kind of hobby would you like?
yes, exactly. Right. So I was thinking my dad likes woodworking. Not for me. I was a photographer professionally for about 7 years, but it feels a little bit like work, even though I still like it. And at one point, it just dawned on me, I love learning things. Like I just love, that's
Mhm.
like my hobby.
Yeah.
So I love, and I thought for at that time, this is probably 8 years ago, like, what do you want to learn? And one of the thoughts that came up was, I want to learn French. And so I just started learning and like, I I kept at it like for 7, 8 years. I got really quite fluent and it was like fun. Not that I have to become perfect, but it was just fun. This was me listening to myself.
Yeah.
Same with what I'm learning about HSPs or what I'm learning about psychology. And I was not a psychology student in school, but I'm really enjoying learning about the mind. I love spirituality. Like I'm finding what I love, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a process of asking yourself. And Byron Katie says this really beautifully. She says, just ask, have you asked you? She asked that question. Have you
Have
asked
you
you?
asked you? I love
Oh,
it.
I love that. Because I usually hadn't asked myself. I just looked at what other people thought about me. I asked them what they would suggest. I looked for advice. But more and more, I give time for myself. It might take time to really find out what moves me, what interests me. And I use that in my business all the time. Like
Yeah.
I changed to working only with HSPs. That happened just like as radical for me, but it kind of happened gradually over time of me saying like, okay, who do I am I most equipped to serve? What would I like to be doing? And I keep asking. It can be on a small level. What should my URL be or whatever. And then
Right.
you just spend time and it might take weeks or months or years and then the answers do come. So that's how I approach it.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, and I love the grace that you gave yourself and that I'm sure you give clients and that we should all give ourselves, which is it might take months, it might take years, it might happen that day, who knows? You might be wondering what your favorite color is and look at a palette of 1,000 different colors and instantly maybe. Or maybe you have to look through each one and sit with it and it might take you years to figure that out. But either way, it's okay. Like we're all on this journey of self-discovery. There is not one person, I suspect, who knows exactly who they are right at this moment.
Yeah.
And I like that because it's, we have this false sense, and particularly with social media being so pervasive. And if we just watch reels or listen to what people have to say on social media, we might come away with the idea that people have it all figured out
Yeah.
about themselves and everything else. And the truth is, we all know very little and we just keep learning. And if we keep an open mind and an open heart, we're going to learn a lot more. Well,
Yes.
I feel like we haven't gotten into all the things that I wanted to get into. So this might be one of those. And there's a part two with Todd Smith. But
That'll be fun.
I know we were talking about, this three-part framework, and I know we've talked a little bit about that, but maybe for those who are interested, maybe give a little high-level summary of your three-part framework.
And yeah, so I'm trying to think of like three-part framework in terms of support for highly sensitive people.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. I
Okay.
should have
Yeah.
asked that more artfully.
No, it's fine. There are a lot of three-part frameworks.
Yes.
Everything can be. So yeah, I think of like I teach stress management for highly sensitive people. That's really what I do. And I use the work of Byron Katie as one of the main tools there. What I consider the three pillars of stress management for highly sensitive people is, first of all, I already mentioned understanding the HSP trait so that you stop judging yourself, so you feel more compassion for who you actually are and how you fit into the world and what your strengths are. HSPs are not built for speed, they're built for depth. So just knowing that can really change how you see yourself when you're unable or uninterested in going and doing something in the speedy way, but you're really interested in doing something in a slow, impractical depth way. So understanding the trait is the first one. The second one is what I call outer work, which is looking at how you can live a balanced life in whatever way that means. There are many factors here, including your health, including your diet and exercise, but also learning how to say no in a really nice way, like how to say no and have it be kind at the same time, but also clear. And knowing, again, what the limits are for a highly sensitive person, knowing what that how to respect and create time for yourself to sleep, to meditate, to take care of your needs as well. So outer work, there can be a whole world there of that. And in a way, a lot of the world does focus on outer work because it's practical and it's helpful. And to ignore it is, like you can, but why not have that outer balance as well?
Right.
Then the third pillar is inner work, and it has to do with really loosening your attachment to your ego, to what you're think you're needing and wanting, to winning and losing, to winning rather than losing. I don't think anyone's attached to losing, but to getting what you want. Like we all want what we want. And even if you can't find balance through outer work and your life has trouble, you have some health problem or the relationship just is a problem or whatever it is, money, you can still find inner freedom through the inner work. And that's sort of the ace in the hole. That's really like the deepest layer of this. I call my program the HSP Inner Freedom Program because that's the core of it. But I like to include the other two because they're also super important. And that kind of traverses the whole range from the practical to the inner kind of letting go that happens that allows you to be free in any situation. If getting what you want and not getting what you want become somehow a little bit equal, even though they are different, if they're both okay, then there's freedom there. So that's where doing the work of Byron Katie, that's where meditation, that's where the inner work really can support you in being peaceful no matter what's going on in the world around you.
Yeah. Like I said, I think there needs to be a part two because I think we could talk more about the inner work that is possible for a lot longer. And I love how you talk about it as an experience rather than a destination. It's just something that is available to all of us if we, number one, understand the traits of being a highly sensitive person, to the extent that we have agency over our outer work, doing that, and then doing the inner work, and we can really experience a freedom like we haven't known before. But it's totally available to us at any time.
Yeah, that's the cool thing. You can be boxed in the worst imaginable situation, right? You could be on your deathbed, right? Completely boxed in, can't go anywhere, can't move, and you're dying. And you can find freedom. Freedom is still available in any situation. And that's because there's always space on the inside. No matter how cramped it is on the outside, there's always space on the inside. You just have to look for it.
Right. Wonderful. Well, I want to be respectful of time and close this out, but to the extent that we might have a part two, so just put that in your back pocket there. Was there anything that you were hoping to talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about today?
Not really. I've just been flowing so easily with your questions and just enjoying the way this has unfolded. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, where can people find you and find out more about your work and inner freedom and all those good things that we talked about today?
Yeah, there are two ways people can find me. One is just go to my podcast. I have a podcast called Stress Management for Highly Sensitive People. If you just type in HSP, you'll find it there very easily. And there are a lot of episodes there, so there's plenty you can play with. And then the other is to take the HSP stress test on my website, which is trueinnerfreedom.com. If you go there, it's like a 5 or 10 minute test, and it will help you to not only identify where you fall on the spectrum of sensitivity, because it is a spectrum, whether you are a highly sensitive person. And it will also help you see what kind of stresses you're facing, what you're looking at. And it can be the starting point for working with me if you want to go further.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll make sure to put all of those in the show notes as well, because I want people to be able to find you and the work that you do, and have really appreciated our conversation and hope to arm wrestle you into another episode somewhere down the road, because I think people are going to really respond very well to everything that you offered here today. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'd be happy to come back again. It'd be great to talk with you again.
Wonderful. Well, we'll see you soon then.
Okay.
Thank you for joining me on the Fully Mindful podcast. If you got value from this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who'd love this content too. Remember, small moments of mindfulness can lead to big changes in your day-to-day life. Until next time, take a deep breath, stay present, and tap into your own mindfulness. I'll see you next week.